Okay, well, welcome everyone to Grow Smart CLT, Transforming Central Avenue and Beyond with Bus and Bike Lanes. I'm really excited for tonight's presentation. I guess it's still daytime. Today's presentation, we have an excellent lineup of speakers from Charlotte DOT and CATS, and I'll introduce them in just a moment. Siboney is going to bring up our presentation, and I'll get started by just kind of talking us through the flow of our event. It's going to be a pretty information-packed hour, but we're going to leave some time for you to ask questions as well. So we're going to go to the agenda slide. And first, I just want to talk through some logistics. So if you have questions, the way that you'll ask those is by typing them into the Q&A box that will appear on the bottom of your screen. We will not be able to see you or hear you, and the way that you can interact is either by asking those questions to the panelists in the Q&A box, or if you wanted to chat with other attendees or panelists, of course they won't be able to respond as they're presenting, you can also use the chat box. We'll be doing a quick live poll so we can kind of get a sense of your thoughts on some of what we're about to discuss. I'll do introductions, and then we'll round it out with some announcements. And tomorrow you will receive a follow-up email if you registered for this event, which you probably did since you're here. And we do have a post-event survey that will be linked in that email. So we encourage you to take that to give us some feedback. So if Siboney would go to the next slide, we're going to do a quick poll to see some of your thoughts. So the first question is just a practice question. So cats or dogs? The first option, cats rule, dogs drool. Second is woof woof, dogs all the way, don't make me choose a favorite, or ick fur. So this is just practice to make sure you're comfortable with the polling. So the dogs are pulling ahead here. Looks like we have quite a few multi-pet households there. That's me, 4 cats and 2 dogs. And it looks like the cats and the ick fur are about tied. So that just gives you a sense. The dogs win. That gives you a sense of how the polling works. So you can see the results there. So for our next question, whoops. Okay. The next question here, we're going to ask how you currently interact with Central Avenue. So you can choose more than one option. Do you live in the area, work in the area, dine, shop, or enjoy recreation in the area? Are you a car commuter, a bike commuter, or a bus commuter on Central? So I can see a lot of people enjoy spending time in the area, dining, shopping, and enjoying recreation. Quite a few people live there. A lot of car commuters. So give you about 5 more seconds to get your answers in there. Okay, 3, 2, 1. And that's the result. So a large percentage of people just enjoy spending time in the area. We have a few bus commuters and a few bike commuters. So this is about what I expected here. And then for our third poll, we are going to ask one more question, which is what's your level of concern about Charlotte's growing traffic congestion and lack of transportation choices as our population grows? So are you not at all concerned, moderately concerned, very concerned, off the charts, or haven't given it much thought? So a lot of people are pretty concerned, off the charts, very concerned. And let's give it 5 more seconds. 3, 2, and 1. So in general, pretty high levels of concern about the congestion and lack of transportation choices in Charlotte. So that we're really glad that you're here tonight, and hopefully the bus lanes will address some of the issues that we're dealing with here in Charlotte. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I'd like to first introduce Bruce Jones. Bruce is a transportation planner at the Charlotte Area Transit System, better known as CATS. And our next speaker is Jason Lawrence. Jason is a senior transportation planner at CATS. And finally, Scott Curry, who's the active transportation coordinator at the Charlotte Department of Transportation. So as Jason and Bruce prepare to share their slides, I just want to acknowledge a few things. We know that this is an issue that many people have strong feelings about. We know that change is hard. And especially if you live or work in that area, you may have stronger feelings about this issue. So I would just encourage everyone to come to this presentation with an open mind and consider the information that you learned tonight. Please feel free to have discussion in the chat box, but I would just ask that all of that would be respectful and with that spirit of wanting to learn from the presenters and from each other. We know that making real change in a growing city requires a lot of hard choices and trade-offs. It requires vision and courage, not only from city leaders, but also from residents. So I first want to thank you for becoming a part of this conversation and being part of the solution to Charlotte's lack of transportation choices and the many quality of life issues that result from that lack of transportation choices. So I'm now going to turn it over to Katz to present their information.
Thank you, Meg. And I think the way that Bruce and I, we've called an audible, I'm going to do an early piece of this, kind of frame up some things that are going on with CATS, and then I'm going to hand it off to Bruce to cover the rest of the presentation. And as Meg said, I'm Jason Lawrence. I'm a senior transportation planner with CATS and currently also the interim manager of our service planning group. And this is where my relationship with Bruce has kind of come front and center as we look at some of these options to improve bus service throughout our community as Bruce works on many of our service planning efforts. So Bruce, if you go to the next slide. And so I wanted to just, take a moment that, CATS is, just remind everybody, CATS is a department of the city of Charlotte, but we're funded through a countywide transit sales tax. And but what that enables us to do as being a department of the city is to work very seamlessly across all the different departments within the city. And so we're coordinating with the strategic mobility plan that Scott's going to talk about. We are working with the comprehensive plan, the Charlotte 2040, and then we have numerous transit initiatives underway that are all kicking off this year. Next slide. And, we have a 2030 transit system plan. You probably hear that's the most thing that you hear about, CATS, is this broad expansion of rapid transit corridors across Mecklenburg County. But the purpose of a bus lane pilot is to start thinking about how do we prioritize rail, we prioritize bus rapid transit, how do we prioritize bus on local streets? And that's the importance of these kinds of pilots. And that 5-corridor system is evident of what we've done today. You've seen the blue line extension, and we're also looking to advance the Link Silver Line from Matthews all the way to the city of Belmont, and a red line commuter rail to the northern towns, as well as the I-77 bus rapid transit project, and a 10-mile streetcar connecting East and West Charlotte. Next slide. And that Silver Line effort, I just wanted to take a moment to mention that is undergoing a public involvement right now. We have an active comment period underway for that 26-mile long corridor. If you go to ridetransit.org/Link Silver Line, you can comment on the current options that we're considering for the Link Silver Line. So I encourage you to do that. We are advancing that project as fast as we can through 3 efforts: design, TOD, and a rail trail study. Next slide. And then also in coordination with the region, CATS is working with 12 counties in 2 states to advance a regional transit plan. Next slide. That is also happening right now. Thank you, Meg. So we'll work on the acronyms. Transit-oriented development is TOD. And I think this next slide talks about why does mobility matter for any, we talk about traffic congestion, and you talk about growth, but what that comes down to is people. There's a lot of people that are going to be moving here over the number of years. You can see on that slide there that this region that we're in is going to grow by leaps and bounds over the next 25 or so years. And so it's important to think about mobility from an opportunity of choice for all the different types of transit modes. Next slide. And then I want to take it, with that Connect Beyond Regional Mobility Initiative, the goal is to create that single coordinated transit vision across all boundaries. Next slide. And if you go to the connect/beyond.com website, next slide. There we go. That's good enough, Bruce. You can see where we are have an interactive story map right now where you can provide comment on high capacity transit and commuter rail corridors across the entire region as we start thinking outside of our boundaries for mobility. So if you go to connect-beyond.com, you can see that map and provide comment on that as well, with the goal of, once again, developing that unified transit vision across the corridor. So that's what's also going on the CAT side. I want to take a moment to promote two of those ongoing efforts where we still need comment on. And then with that, I'll hand it to the man of the hour. And the main thing on the agenda tonight is Bruce Jones to talk about the Central Avenue bus-only lane pilot.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason. So as Jason mentioned, my name is Bruce Jones, Transportation Planner with CATS. I work in our service planning group dealing primarily with our bus network, but I'm also serving as project manager for this bus-only lane pilot and then also our upcoming bus priority study, which I'll get to in a second. And so to provide you some overview of what we're looking at here, so this is a part of our larger system redesign, which some of you may be familiar with, known as Envision My Ride. For those of you not familiar with it, this is an initiative that we've been working on for a number of years where we took a look at our bus network to identify how we can better redesign it to meet the needs of our riders. And so through working with the public and stakeholders, we found that individuals wanted three main things from their bus network. That's more connectivity throughout Charlotte, and then also more reliability, and then also more frequency. So increasing the number of routes that operate every 15 minutes or better. And so we've been transitioning from a hub and spoke model. And so what I mean by that is before, a number of our routes fed into Uptown and required individuals to connect there to transfer back out to their destination. And so what we're trying to do is create more of a grid network within Charlotte so that we can improve connectivity to other areas and then also create frequent connections to those areas as well. And so that's where we come into this three-phase approach of Envision My Ride. And so the initial phase began back in 2018 with the extension of our light rail network. So this extended into Northeast Charlotte with the Blue Line extension. And so during that period, what we did was modify a number of our routes. So we modified 22 existing routes, established 9 new routes, and then also increased the number of crosstown routes that we had by adding an additional 4 new crosstown connections to feed into that network. So improving connectivity into Northeast Charlotte was the first phase of Envision My Ride. The second phase focused on the second part of phase 1 was October 2018, where we modified an additional 24 routes. And so that's where we took a system-wide approach to improve connectivity by modifying those routes, turning them into crosstown connections, and then also slightly improving frequency on some of those routes. And so that was the initial phase. We're still ongoing with implementing some of those structural adjustments and then also implementing some of those additional crosstown routes. But that's where we are as of October 2018. And then earlier this year, before COVID, we actually increased frequency on a number of our routes too. So we increased frequency on 4 routes to bring us to just under 10 bus routes in total that operate every 15 minutes or better. Of course, as I mentioned, this is before COVID. We did have to reduce our service to a modified schedule because of COVID-19. We are slowly but surely getting back up to service levels before COVID-19, but we're doing that on a case-by-case basis based on demand currently. But then also we implemented Metro Rapid, which is our I-77 express routes that take advantage of the new toll lanes to and from the North Met community. And then as we move into this next phase, that's where this bus priority study and bus only lane pilot comes into play. So what we're looking at is how we can increase the speed and reliability of our network. And so what I mean by that is essentially looking at how we can implement what we're calling priority treatments. And so some of those may be anything from implementing bus only lanes on a number of corridors to also adjusting things like the transit signal priority. So looking at how we can communicate with traffic signals so that we can get extended light or green light at major intersections so that we can continue through the intersection. But then also looking at how we can implement what we're calling queue jumps. And you can see here at this graphic at the top, this is essentially a mechanism so that our buses can pull up to the intersection in a dedicated space. And what happens is all traffic will have a red light at both places at the intersection. So the cross sections at the intersection, traffic will have a red light. Our buses, once they pull up here, will be able to communicate with the signal, and they'll get a specialized signal that allow them to jump through the intersection and continue through beating traffic in that sense. So we're looking at how we can implement other tactics such as that, but then also taking a look at our bus stop spacing and also amenities to figure out how we can increase the speed of or speed and reliability when it comes to our boarding process as well. And so I mentioned the first step of phase 3 is looking at how we can pilot bus-only lanes throughout Charlotte as an initial precursor to the bus priority study. And so this isn't new to Charlotte. It's not new to the nation either. There's been a number of cities that have seen success in implementing bus-only lanes. Here at the local level, we did have a bus-only lane on the Independence Expressway that worked pretty well in our favor for the long run. And then also looking at how other cities have seen success, we decided to identify corridors at a local level in some of our local streets where we can implement similar features to pilot out bus-only lanes to help increase the speed and reliability as we travel along those corridors. And so just to show you some examples, so this is across the area. The Boston area was pretty famous recently for some of their pilots. They've implemented things like temporary cones, temporary paint. Denver, Colorado, which you see here was another example of that. DC, New York City. There's been a number of cities throughout the country that have seen success with this. And then as we move into more permanent lanes, as you can see here in Washington, DC, you have more permanent paint treatments, better signage for the cyclists, more dedicated space for cyclists. In the Portland example here, where you have a shared bus bike lane, but then you have dedicated space for cyclists as they travel to the left of the bus as they travel along that corridor. Then also looking at some examples from New York City. So there's a number of different resources and best practices that we can pull from when we come to making the decision of how we can make similar things permanent at the Charlotte level. And so how this process began, last summer, CATS and CDOT partnered together, and a number of individuals on our staff began to look at corridors throughout Charlotte where we can begin to pilot bus-only lanes. And so we looked at a number of things when it came to these corridors to measure their effectiveness in terms of implementing a bus-only lane. So we wanted to look at corridors that had good bus ridership, good bus frequency, but then we also wanted to look at it from a traffic standpoint to identify what impact that would have on traffic volumes, and other conditions to the roadway as far as roadway capacity. And so from that initial screening, 2 corridors rose to the top of the list, and that was 4th Street in Uptown, and then also Central Avenue between Eastland Transit Center and Eastway Drive. So 4th Street we actually implemented last December. We saw some success with that, which I'll get to here in another slide in a bit. But this was actually a shared bus bike lane between 4th and McDowell and our transit center. The reason why this corridor was selected was because it was a good corridor in terms of bus frequency. So a number of our buses travel along this corridor to get to and from the transit center. And then also looking at the overall roadway capacity, we had before, in some places, 4 lanes of traffic. And so converting that to a bus bike shared lane, we did see some minimal impacts on traffic conditions traveling along that area. And as I mentioned, that was implemented in December of last year. The next one that we're looking at, which is what you see happening on Central Avenue now, is looking at how we can implement a bus-only lane on Central between Eastland Transit Center and then also Eastway Drive. And so this one is set up a little different than 4th Street, where we have a dedicated space for buses, but then we also have a dedicated space for cyclists as they travel along that area as well. And then as we move forward with the bus priority study, which I'll get to in a second, we'll look at how we can implement additional priority treatments along the entire stretch of Central Avenue as we head into Uptown. And so to provide you a visual of what we're looking for with this, so as you can see, the goal is to bridge the gap between Eastland Transit Center and then also our main transit center in Uptown Charlotte. So how can we implement priority treatments along the entire stretch of the corridor? And so phase 1 focused on the Uptown portion from 4th and McDowell to the Transit Center. Phase 2 looked at implementing the pilot from Eastland Transit Center to Eastway Drive. And then now as we move forward, we're looking at how we can implement priority treatments between Eastway Drive and Uptown. And so the bus priority study will take a look at what's possible in the inner segment. We do have some additional challenges that will come into play with this, which I'll get to in a second. Mainly the capacity of the roadway and also the limitations in terms of left turn pockets at a number of intersections. So we'll be identifying with our consultant what's the possibility in terms of implementing priority treatments, and that can be anything from, like I mentioned, the queue jumps to transit signal priority to potentially implementing bus-only lanes as well. But we'll move towards that as we bring our consultant on board. And so just to provide you some background on 4th Street, so back to that. So we did see some operational improvements. We saw that mainly during the peak periods in the AM before COVID, we saw that our buses were traveling about 30% faster throughout that stretch compared to conditions before. So we did see some improvements in terms of operational from a speed perspective, but then also we saw some slight improvements in on-time performance and reaching the transit center from that perspective as well. And then also we released a survey to the public, and we saw that of our bus riders that we surveyed, 15% agreed that they would increase their transit usage if we implemented additional bus-only lanes throughout Charlotte. And then also 83% of cyclists felt that the corridor was an improvement compared to the conditions before. And so before, as I mentioned, this was just a lane of traffic shared with cars and buses, and then we just had a dedicated space for cyclists. And so what we did was convert this entire lane to a shared bus-bike lane, and cyclists overall felt that it was an improved sense of comfort compared to the conditions before. Now, as we move to phase 2, which is the Central Avenue portion between Eastland and Eastway Drive. So this was initially approved at the September 8th session by council. And so what we are implementing here, as I mentioned, is converting the far right lane into a bus-only lane, and then also leaving space for cyclists. So this would mean that the left lane will remain active to individuals traveling by car. And so this is opening up in phases. The eastbound side opened up last week on September 28th, and now we're currently putting the final touches on the westbound side. And so this is expected to be finalized tomorrow, actually. And so we'll have both lanes operating fully in both directions by tomorrow. And so, of course, this includes, like I mentioned, converting that lane. So we're implementing a solid white line throughout. This does become a dashed line at major intersections to indicate where individuals can get over to make a right turn. I do want to stress too, which I'll get to here in a second, that individuals that need to access the driveways or businesses or any other destinations can enter this lane to make a right turn. So this isn't restricting you from entering the lane, except for at major intersections. You can enter the lane whenever you need to make a right turn at any of those key destinations along it. And then also another thing that we're looking at is increasing bus frequency. And so as recently as Monday, we actually increased frequency on Route 9 to operate every 10 minutes on weekdays between 6 in the morning and 7 in the evening. So we'll have good frequent service along this corridor, and we'll continue to evaluate the need for additional frequency improvements as we move further along into the pilot. And so some of the initial things that we did for outreach. So as soon as we got the approval from council, we began to do some outreach to our social media and website channels. And so we began to advertise this project. We began to advertise how-to documents so that individuals know what to expect on the lane. And then also present information to some of our advisory committees. And so we present information to our Transit Services Advisory Committee, our Bicycle Advisory Committee, and then also our Metropolitan Transit Commission, just to get their input on it as well, and then also inform them so that they can inform their constituents throughout the process. We did also take this information out to local businesses on the corridor so that they're aware of what's going on. We wanted to make sure that they were on board and make sure that they were informed of the process as well. And then also continuing to send out email blasts. We did have a media outreach event. And then we also, the important thing is we do have a survey that's coming out to the public, which opens on October 12th. And so we do encourage individuals that are traveling by bus, traveling by bicycle, and also traveling by car to partake in this survey so that you can share your feedback with us as well. And as I mentioned before, so this is just an infographic to show you how to use a lane. This is available on our social media platforms and our website if you'd like to have a closer look at this. Essentially, this is showing you how you can use a lane if you're traveling by car, if you're a cyclist, pedestrian, or if you're on the bus. And so as I mentioned too, cars are permitted to enter the lane when making a right turn. That's at any major intersection, any local intersection, any business, or any driveway. So you're actually permitted to enter the lane to make that right-hand turn. You do want to make sure that you do look out for any oncoming buses and cyclists in the lane before you merge over to make that right-hand turn as well. But I just want to stress that important feature that you are permitted to enter the lane when you are making the right turn. So you do not make your right turn from this left lane. Make sure you get into the right lane to do that. And as I mentioned before, if you want to look this over, this is available on our social media platforms and our website. You can visit ridetransit.org, and we have a link on our website for individuals that would like a closer look at that. And then moving to phase 3, I mentioned that this one is a little more challenging in terms of what we can do on this segment because it is more constrained. As you can see from this section here, it's typically just a 4-lane road. When you're going to major intersections, often at some of the intersections, there are no left turn lanes. So individuals that are turning left are doing so from this left lane of traffic. So this is a little more challenging in terms of what we can do in terms of transit priority treatments. As I mentioned, it could be something along the line as we continue with our bus priority study and identifying what we can implement here. It can be anything from implementing a bus only lane to simply implementing transit signal priority. And then also queue jumps at major intersections. So the big takeaway from this is that we'll have to do a little more design and study before we actually implement anything on that inner segment from Eastway Drive to Uptown. And just to show you, this is a visual that shows you some of the challenges, and what these arrows indicate are intersections where we do not have left turn lanes. And so as you can see, the outer segment, we had that center turning lane. So it was pretty smooth sailing between Eastland and the Eastway Drive. But as we enter the inner segment, we do have some of those intersections where making a left turn will be challenging. So if we were to convert that to a bus only lane, that would have an impact on traffic. So we want to make sure that we do do a deeper analysis and study of this section before we decide what to implement on that feature. And then I also want to stress too that these are both planned pilots, specifically for the Eastway to Eastland. So right now we're looking at a 6-month time frame. So we're going to continue with our public outreach, but then we're also going to continue with our analysis. So we'll analyze the survey results, but then also look at what impact this has from a traffic standpoint as well, considering conditions now, then also considering conditions before COVID, before we had the decrease in traffic conditions. So we'll continue to do that throughout this phase, or the pilot, throughout the pilot for the next 6 months. We'll continue to analyze that. And then as we move into the Eastway to Uptown section, as I mentioned, that's where the bus priority study will come into play. And so once we bring our consultant on board, which we've identified Kittleson and Associates to assist us with this effort. And so as they come on board, they'll help us identify what we can do on the inner segment, but then also look at additional corridors throughout Charlotte to help us identify what's possible in some of those corridors to help increase the speed and reliability on a number of our roads, specifically our high frequency network plans that we have through Envision My Ride. And with that, I know we have questions. Before we get to that, I think Scott is going to share an update from the CDOT side. So
yes, thank you so much, Bruce and Jason, for that very, very informative presentation about the bus lanes and the overall purpose of them and what's coming next. So we're now going to turn it over to Scott Curry, who's the Active Transportation Coordinator, at Charlotte DOT. And he'll be talking a little bit more about how bus lanes will benefit cyclists and how to use them safely.
Great, thanks Meg. Thanks to JL and Bruce for the really thorough explanation of the project. I'm going to go through just a few things about how CDOT and CATS have been collaborating on not just bus only lanes, but about mobility in general for the city of Charlotte. And I want to set it up, and some of you who are familiar with the Sustained Charlotte Grow Smart events may have seen this slide before, but I like using it because I think it's a good reminder that the city of Charlotte is a public space management agency. We maintain a lot of streets, all the city streets within the city, and that is really our greatest public space resource. If you add up all the other public space we have in parks, schools, greenways, nature preserves, government buildings, all of that does not add up to the amount of public space that we maintain within our street network, which means that currently we use the majority of our public space in the city of Charlotte to move and store cars. And part of that is due to sort of an imbalance with how we have planned for transportation in the past. And the bus bike lanes are a part potentially of the solution for bringing more balance to our transportation network and our public space management in the future. We do surveys every couple of years just to gauge resident behaviors and preferences. And in our most recent survey, 73% of residents told us that they want to drive less, and 80% told us that they think streets should be designed for walking, biking, and transit in addition to cars. And so I want to start, before I jump into some of some higher level things related to bus and bike coordination between CDOT and CATS, I want to give some specific tips for cyclists who might be navigating the new bus bike lane, the new bus lane on Central. Buses are going to enter the bike lane as they approach transit stops, just like they did before the bus only lane was there. So be alert, especially at transit stops, for buses boarding and alighting. And if you are a comfortable cyclist and feel like you want to pass the bus using the bus only lane, you can do that. The safety tips we have for you there is just to use proper merging practices like you would if you were riding anywhere else on the roadway. Use a hand signal and check over your shoulder to make sure that there's no one approaching you in the bus lane. Like Bruce mentioned, right turns are still allowed from the bus lane, so stay alert for right turns turning across your path. Bus headway should be about every 5 minutes, and so if you were traveling inbound from the Eastland Mall area, you should really only expect to be passed by a few buses along your route as you head into the city. We at CDOT see the bus lane as a significant benefit to cyclists because essentially now we've got an 11-foot buffer between the general travel lane and the bike lane. So from our point of view, it's an upgrade to the existing bike facility. That said, there are still conflicts that you will experience as a cyclist along that corridor. So we just encourage you to be vigilant, enjoy riding with a little more space out there, but don't assume that that means that you are free and clear, and always keep an eye out for cars. And then the last tip is just to emphasize something Bruce said, which is there's going to be a survey opening on October 12th to get input. We definitely want to hear from folks in our cycling community about their experience along this new facility. I want to talk a little bit about something that has been a focus of coordination between CATS and CDOT recently, which is just kind of interactions that occur at bus stops. We have a lot of competition for the things that occur in our curb lanes. Bus lanes, bike lanes, delivery and loading, Uber and Lyft, on-street parking, e-scooters, all of those things use the curb lane. And so this has been an area of focus for CDOT and CATS to try to do the best we can to mitigate potential conflicts and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to navigate bus stops safely. This is an image from NACTO that some of you have likely seen before. It sort of shows what I described earlier in a slightly different treatment of a cyclist being able to pass a stopped bus that's boarding passengers. This is another technique that we've used, again, another pilot project. This is in Uptown, where we've installed a platform that actually ramps the bike lane up and over the bus loading area. This does two things. It calms cyclists who are approaching a bus stop, so it's intended to be a traffic calming thing for the bike lane. It also makes it easier for CATS buses to board and alight from the existing travel lane. Previous to this installation, the CATS buses would pull into the bike lane, essentially blocking the bike lane and the travel lane, so nobody really had their own space. This brings a little bit more order to that situation and kind of makes it clear that when a bus is stopped and boarding, that cyclists should yield to that activity. Ultimately, we love to provide everybody with their own space. And so this is an image that shows a bus loading island with a bike lane that bends in behind it. If y'all have been on the Elizabeth Avenue corridor where the streetcar goes through CPCC, you've seen something similar to this in Charlotte. This is sort of the best case scenario because cyclists are able to move past the bus while it's boarding and loading in their own space. They don't have to merge out into a bus lane or into traffic. And so this is the kind of thing that we'd be looking to implement more often in the implementation of future transit priority types of projects. I want to talk a little bit about another area of coordination related to a bus and bike project. So you're looking now at the Uptown Cycle Link alignment through Uptown Charlotte. This is a project to install an all ages and abilities bike network in Uptown. That will be the first bike facility that connects all the way into and across Uptown to the Greenway network on both sides. We've been coordinating a lot with CATS on this one because College Street is a corridor that they have identified as a potential bus priority area. It's also a corridor on our alignment for the Uptown Cycle Link. And so we've spent some time coordinating with CATS on what this could look like in the future. We don't have any final design plans, but this is one rendering of what that concept might look like. And you can see we've got the bike lane that runs behind this floating bus platform. A bus only lane and still maintaining 2 lanes of travel. This also contemplates what a mobility hub might look like in this location with a transit shelter, bike and e-scooter parking, bike share station. This could be a really great opportunity for residents and visitors at the convention center to be able to access different types of mobility all in one place. And this is just an example of what that looks like from plan view. One of the reasons why we are drawn to this type of concept is because it would convert College Street into a safer street. Traffic would move more slowly, but it would also be a more efficient street. A bus only lane can move a lot more people per hour than a car lane can. And so we actually have more capacity to move people in a street designed like this than we do with College Street in its current configuration. And so I want to conclude by just honing in again on the Central Avenue area and taking a look at, this is our existing bike network today, and giving you a glimpse at some of the things we have in the works to try to stitch together an even better bike network in the future. The purple lines are suggested or signed bike routes, orange are existing bike lanes, and then the green are really the all ages and abilities buffered, protected types of bike facilities and greenways. And so when I advance the slide, you're going to see a number of things pop in. You'll see some of that Uptown Cycle Link infrastructure I mentioned. You'll see the Parkwood Streetscape project that I know some of the Sustained Charlotte audience has heard a lot about already. You'll see this project on Kilbourne and Norland, which is going to install a new AAA bike facility on that corridor. This is some of the county's work on the Briar Creek Greenway corridor, and then this dotted line is the potential phase 3 of the bus pilot that Bruce covered really well earlier. So with that, I'm going to end, and Meg, I'll turn it back over to you and your team to help field any questions and fill in anything we missed.
Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate hearing all those details, and I'm getting very excited about not only what's already out there on the ground, but what's coming in the future. So Siboney is going to transition us over to our question and answer slide. And as you're typing your questions into the Q&A box, I just want to ask a quick question of each of our panelists and just try to answer it in about a minute or less. But what is an action that our attendees tonight could take to support bus prioritization and multimodal streets from your perspective? So whoever wants to take that first could do it.
I would say just be willing to explore change with us, because I know these are new facilities and new things, and it is a change. And I think that's the point of piloting. So I think that's the one thing, to work with us, tell us what's not working, tell us what is working, and work with us as we work through pilots.
Thank you, Jason. I'll echo that too. It's a good time to test and refine and give feedback and acknowledge that change is hard, but definitely necessary. Bruce or Scott, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, just echoing what Jason mentioned, and also just making sure that you stay informed of some of our initiatives. So some of the cycle track plans that Scott mentioned, but then also with CATS from our bus priority project, just making sure that you stay in the loop and provide input throughout that. because definitely public input throughout all those projects are what drive the final results. So we definitely want to keep you in the loop for those projects.
For sure, and we will do our part here at Sustain Charlotte to keep you all informed about those input opportunities and education opportunities. We'll share that survey about the bus lane when it opens on October 12th and encourage you all to take it. And, you know, post it on Nextdoor, post it on your social media, and be a champion for this to your neighbors and share some of the information that you've learned tonight. Scott, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share?
I'll just add that I've always been impressed with how savvy the Sustain Charlotte audience is about things like this. You all are smart folks, and you've also traveled around the country and have seen a lot of different things like this. Bus-only lanes are new-ish to Charlotte, but they're certainly not new within the country. And similarly, cycle tracks are fairly new to Charlotte, but not new within the country. So I just encourage you all to bring back the experiences and lessons that you have learned in other places, and help us to apply them here in a way that really adds up to something great. So.
Yeah, for sure. I've been to a number of cities throughout the US and the world, and one of the things that I've realized all those cities that I most love have in common is they're really easy to navigate without a car. I almost never rent a car when I travel, and I fall in love with the cities that I can easily get around without a car. So thank you so much to our panelists, and now Mary Catherine is going to share some of the questions that have been raised in the Q&A box.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so the questions have been coming in. First thing, I want to start with a question that we have got prior to tonight's presentation, but does CATS expect to add more buses to the number 9 route if the dedicated lane allows them to predict the route better? I guess that might be for you, Bruce.
Yeah, so we, as recently as I mentioned this past Monday, did add additional frequency to the Route 9. So previously we had 10-minute service only from 10 to 7 in the evening. We extended that to 6 in the morning to 7 in the evening. And so a part of this too, as we continue to evaluate the impact of the bus-only lane and the demand for service, we'll continue to explore the possibility of implementing additional frequency along that route. So to answer your question, yes, we are exploring that. And that is something that's definitely possible.
That's fantastic. Okay, next, Charlotte East is coordinating a street eats the last 2 weekends of October at Kilbourne and Central. This would be a very good opportunity for the city to bring their survey to the site for input. Could we talk about that? Is that a possibility that you guys would be interested in?
I would say, yeah, definitely. If it's getting the word out and definitely getting as much feedback as we can, definitely is a goal of ours. So we would definitely be interested in that.
Fantastic.
And Bruce, I would just add to that we're willing and able to present to any neighborhood organization. You know, obviously we're doing a lot of virtual interaction. We've had a lot of good success with that, but we're happy to talk about this or any of the projects that we have on. But certainly we could give a presentation directly to Charlotte East or to any of the neighborhoods along the line.
Awesome. That's really helpful. Are any of the tests going towards streetcars or in place of streetcars? Sure,
I'll take that one. So I think I saw that was from Carolyn Millen from Eastway Sheffield Park. Good to see you again. Along Central Avenue, there is phase 3 of the streetcar would extend from the current terminus at Sunnyside Avenue near Hawthorne, near Central Avenue, and would extend all the way along Central to the Eastland Transit Center. The bus lane pilot is not intended to replace anything that's in our long-range plans. And in fact, I would look at this as a test of not just bus-only lane, but transit-only lane. And think about that, if this works well for buses, then it could work well for streetcar. And so that's something that we'll be folding into our consideration as we advance phase 3 of streetcar. So this is not in any way meant to replace anything that with the streetcar.
Awesome. That's super helpful. How will this lane be policed from lane jumpers on the right and high traffic?
So yeah, we are working with CMPD, and we are working with them to monitor the lane. And so essentially, I think Jason might be able to speak into more detail about this if I don't cover everything, but essentially there is language that we've been partnering with them to make sure that we educate the public what to expect on that and what's permitted in the lane. They will be working to do an educational campaign for individuals that they do stop who are traveling in the lane. So they'll just make sure that they inform individuals that this is a new concept, this is a new bus only lane, this is what you're expected to do in the corridor. So that will be taking place, I believe, as early as tomorrow. And Jason, you can probably add more to that.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, we've been working with the Eastway division and our own CATS police liaisons with CMPD, and defining how we would want to enforce the lane. And so I think up first they're just going to look at just having a visible presence out there and just monitor the situation. Let's see if people adhere to it, and then maybe it goes into warnings after that. But it's really, we're going to observe and see how people are using the lane or using it appropriately, because we do still want people to allow them to make right turns. Yeah, there is an enforcement component to this, and we are coordinating with CMPD.
Awesome, guys. We have gotten quite a few questions about Spanish outreach. Christina Donis, for example, said, would it be possible to add some details about the Central Avenue bus lane pilot at the bus stops and shop windows along Central Avenue in English and Spanish? I live at Temple Lane and Central Avenue. Despite social media sharing, my next door app neighbors and many people at the bus stops are confused about what's happening.
Yeah, so we definitely have an infographic too that's been translated into Spanish, and we can definitely share that with the group tonight. I'll send it over to Meg, see if we can share that. But yeah, we can definitely post more information on our bus stops, and then also be sure to share that through social media as well. But we do have a Spanish translation available and ready to get that out.
And Bruce, I'll just add, last week, if you recall, you and a few team members went out and walked the pilot and hand delivered information to businesses along the corridor. And we had a customer service representative with us who speaks Spanish to help communicate if there were any language barriers along the way. So that is a very important part of our outreach.
Fantastic. Okay, so as we wrap it up, I'm going to end it with one last question from one of our participants, Tara. She asked, will the CATS drivers get extra training on how to coordinate with bicyclists, like bicyclists passing on the left?
So Bruce, I'll take this one. We are doing a concentrated coordination with our operators around BOD to talk this through. We have some video training. I'll have to check whether or not we've specifically called out that bikes can pass on the left. I'm sure that happens in the field today. They're probably aware of that, but that's something that we can look into for them to be aware of as they're pulling over into the bike lane, that you're right, cyclists may go around, and they just need to be aware of that. But our operators are certainly aware of their surroundings, but we can check into that.
Fantastic. We might have time for one last question, so I'll ask this one from Brian Smith. Has there been any consideration to create a buffered bike lane similar to the plaza along Queens Road where so many cyclists use the road?
I think I can jump on that one. So part of our work on the strategic mobility plan, which Meg mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, is to identify a bike priority network. This is something that was a recommendation of the Charlotte Bikes Plan that was adopted back in 2017. And we're excited that the strategic mobility plan is going to help us to describe what our bike priority network is throughout the city, and also help us to guide our capital investment to install that new bike infrastructure. So stay tuned to the strategic mobility plan, because I think you'll see some things throughout the city for how we envision the future of bikes.
All right, well, thank you so much to all of our fantastic panelists. Wherever you are, please give them a virtual round of applause. I think that might be a record for the number of questions that we've gotten through. And unfortunately, as always happens, we never quite have time to get to every question, but I will be sharing the questions that we weren't able to answer with the panelists, so they'll see the concerns that you've raised. And now we just have a few brief announcements. First, we really encourage you to add your voice to the conversation about future transportation choices in Charlotte. There's a lot of decisions that are going to be made before the end of this year in terms of what types of transportation choices and mobility options are needed in Charlotte, as well as how to pay for them. So this link will be included in your follow-up email tomorrow. It's the Charlotte Moves survey, and we really encourage you to take that and share it with your neighbors. If we go to the next slide, we are super excited to invite you to Biketoberfest. It's going to look a little different, actually a lot different this year. It'll be the weekend of October 24th and 25th, so you can do it on your own time, any time slot that works during that weekend. You could spend the whole weekend doing Biketoberfest. And unlike the past years where we've had a fixed route, this year we really have a choose your own adventure with route options. So our bike head coordinator, Eric, has spent a lot of time putting together some fantastic route options. So if you go to sustainedcharlotte.org/Biketoberfest, that will give you a link to be able to register and see all those different routes. There's also going to be an opportunity to ride your bike along the bus, not in the bus lane, but in the bike lane portion as part of the event. And so we're really grateful to the city of Charlotte for sponsoring this event this year. So you'll have that opportunity to experience the new bus and bike lane area as a cyclist. And then by that point, the survey will be open, so you can give your feedback on it as part of the event. Another thing that we're trying different this year is that you'll have an opportunity, the option to help raise funds for Sustain Charlotte as part of this event. So we really encourage you to, if you love Sustain Charlotte and you want to see more of the work that we do spreading throughout the community, please, consider helping us raise funds. And on that note, I'd like to turn it over to Mary Catherine Freeman, who is our development associate, who can talk for just a couple minutes about how you can support Sustain Charlotte.
I was muted. Hi, everyone. How's it going? Just to close this all out, as many of you know, we at Sustain Charlotte are a nonprofit. So we are running off of, we are able to do the work that we do because of the generous support of our donors. And if you are interested in getting involved, we first of all want to recognize that we know that COVID has been a really tough time for all of us, that budgets are tight, and that we are frankly in an economic crisis right now. But if you have the capacity and the capability, we'd really love to invite you to get involved on a financial level. And there's several different ways to do that. You can make a one-time donation. You can sign up to become a monthly donor or a sustaining member, as we like to say at Sustain Charlotte. You can also, I would also encourage you to reach out to your employers. A lot of times we have people who may not be able to give on their own, but their employers might be interested in joining our partnership network, which is a network of companies and corporate organizations across the city of Charlotte that donate to us and partner with us. And so maybe you can't give personally, but your organization or company could. Also ask about employee match giving programs. Those are becoming very popular. And we have a lot of people that are giving through those programs. And then one last plug, I'll say, for Biketoberfest. This is an event that is going to be like none other before that we've ever done. And to make this an event a success, like we truly need for our supporters to stack hands around us and rally around us, and would love for you guys to take part in the event on your own, and also to fundraise for us if that's something that you're interested in. So Meg, I will turn it back over to you. And one last thing is I'll just say I'll thank our donors so much. If you're already supporting us, know that your generosity truly means more than ever before, and that we just couldn't do the work that we do without you guys. So thanks so much, and over to you, Meg.
Thank you, Mary Catherine, and thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Again, be on the lookout for a follow-up email tomorrow, and that will have all of the links that were shared in today's presentation. And also, please remember to take that post-event survey so that we can make our next event even better. So keep an eye out for that, and we look forward to seeing you at another event very soon, and hopefully seeing you on Biketoberfest. And there's a lot of great interactive activities for Biketoberfest, so we'll be able to interact with you, even though we probably won't see you in person. So thank you so much, and have a great night.
Thanks, everyone.